Hi, good morning, everyone. As we get started, for those of you that want to turn on your camera, it's always good to see faces. We're going to be a relatively small group today, which was intentional. So if you want to stay on Zoom at the beginning, but we'll have plenty of time for you to come off of Zoom and ask any questions. And if you want in the chat to put who you are, what organization you're with, and where you're zooming in from today. It's the dog days of summer. And so some of you might be sitting in nice air conditioning offices, but some of you might be zooming in from fun, cool vacation spots. So it'd be good to know where everyone's sitting today. So thanks everyone for being here. This is specifically an info session that is going to focus on how to submit your financial information for flexible funding. I'll go through a little bit of the top line about flexible funding itself, but if you have broader questions, there are a couple of ways to reach us, and I'll share those at the end as well. One is that we'll have an in-person session this afternoon at the Wilbraham Library starting at, Margaret, what time
Starts
is
at
it?
noon and it goes until 3 o'clock.
Wonderful. We'll also have an in-person session this Thursday in Springfield from 2 to 5. We'll have a session next week in Hadley, and we'll also have virtual sessions. So all of that information is on our website. Um, I should start. I'll formally introduce myself and have Margaret introduce herself. I'm Meredith Lewis. I'm the Senior Director of Impact and Partnerships at the Community Foundation. I've been with the foundation close to 3 years, so I see certainly many familiar faces on this Zoom and plenty of new faces, which is really exciting.
And I'm Margaret from the foundation, and I am a grants administrator. I know I have spoken with quite a few of you during the course of submitting applications and stuff. So I'm always happy to help.
Great. So we have a quick deck. If it helps you to look at it, that's great. I'll share my screen, and if it helps, just you can also pin me and make me look big. If you're a person that the PowerPoint is distracting, we will make sure that the PowerPoint that we share and the recording of this will be emailed to everyone who registered. It'll also go on our website later this week. So here we go. Can I just get a thumbs up from someone that you can see the screen? Not yet. That's why we do that. How about now? Excellent. Thank you
Okay,
so
got it
much.
now.
Great. And also, if you have any questions at any moment, throw them in the chat, or we'll tell you when you can come off mute and ask all of your questions. So just to recap a little bit, flexible funding, this is our fourth year. And so some things are working very similar to how they've worked all the previous 3 years, and some of them are working different. One of the main ones that's working different is that we're only funding in our focus areas. We have an expanded number of focus areas this year. So, on one hand, more people should be eligible under those focus areas. But you also might find in a conversation that if your agency, based on both the work that you do and geography, doesn't fall into our focus areas, I want to acknowledge it's a really hard thing to hear from the Community Foundation. We're really cognizant that we're one of a few funders in the area. If that's the case, you should still reach out to us. We're always happy to brainstorm to say what other funding opportunities might be available from Community Foundation at later points in time, as well as what might be available in our region, statewide, nationally, that might be a good fit for you. So our first focus area have been the ones of the Community Foundation since our strategic plan was launched in 2020. So this includes a focus on organizations that are working in the racial justice space, and that is their primary mission, really working on promoting equity and creating pathways for marginalized BIPOC populations. The second is post-secondary education and training. So that is for organizations who are working with that post-secondary population. We know that there's a lot of stuff that has to get you to that point to graduate and to complete your secondary education in elementary school. We really focus on that population, generally speaking, 18 and older, that is going in to either further their education or their training with an eye towards entering the workforce and economic development, and making sure that people have opportunity to earn and to live comfortably and to thrive. Our third focus area is Strong Start for Children, which really focuses on supporting children and their families ages 0 to 5. That can look like our amazing nonprofit early childhood care centers in the region. That also looks like various family supports, but that's really focused for organizations whose primary mission is 0 to 5. The one exception in that area is if you are a larger agency like a YMCA and you have a preschool that is comparable to a freestanding preschool, that could be one classroom, that could be 6 classrooms, but you do that, we're open and you'll qualify under that strategic focus area, even though we know that YMCAs and community centers and the like are doing additional work beyond that. And our last focus area is a vibrant arts and creativity ecosystem. For those of you that are have been involved with it, or you might hear Valley Creates is the name that we use that. And that's really for organizations whose primary mission is in arts, creating arts, all sorts of variety of media, but working with arts presenting organizations and artist-based organizations. It's not for individual artists. We have some grants programs that do that. We're currently in the middle of one of those cycles. So if you have any questions, am I an organization? Am I an artist? Reach out to us. We'll help you with that. We then knew this year, and I think I just saw one of our colleagues from Mass Mutual join us, which is really, really delightful. We're happy to be in partnership with them. Thank you, Matthew. To be working on organizations that focus on financial resilience, serving the Springfield community. And so there are 4 focus areas, and you'll hear throughout this that some of them overlap with our strategic focus areas, and some of them are helping us expand. So the first one is building networks that really help people access critical resources, again, with an eye towards financial resiliency. We know whether there's so many systems that we have in our society that financially are just really hard to navigate. And so who are the organizations that are helping people through connecting with other folks access those services, get to be a place that they're more financially stable and resilient? The second one is fostering financial health. And so that includes business coaching, that includes some elements of financial literacy, really helping people get to be in a better place financially. Fulfilling basic financial needs, those are all of the things that we need in order to be able to work. And so that includes primarily food security, housing security, and reliable childcare. And the last one is expanding employment opportunities, which has a strong alignment with our post-secondary education and training, helping people get the education and the skills and entrepreneurship and business development skills in order to do that work. One of your first questions might be, what is Springfield serving organizations? So if you're based in Springfield, if you're serving primarily Springfield residents, like that should be pretty straightforward. If you're a regional organization, we should be in conversation to understand what is the population that's serving in Springfield. Are you looking to expand those numbers? Are you primarily based somewhere else, but you have some people that you serve in Springfield? That's less likely to be a good fit. There's not one set definition, which is why you'll notice we'll have a lot of opportunities in this webinar where we'll say, email us at grants, come to one of our drop-in hours, come meet us in person. We want to have a conversation with you to understand that. And our last grouping of strategic focus areas is focused on Franklin County, and that's family economic resiliency. And so you'll hear a lot of overlap also with the Springfield serving food security, housing security, and basic needs, health, transportation, human services. Again, if you have a question, reach out. Let's have a conversation. But this is really focused understanding that particularly in Franklin County, the nexus of people needing a place to live, like literally housing, needing to be able to have food security needs met, and needing to be able to find work is a triangle of really right now sometimes very complicated systems to navigate. And we feel like that if we can improve any one of those points, that people are going to be better off. And so we're looking to try to make some investments in all of those areas. So I just want to pause right there for a moment and say that all of that information is also on our website. And if you say, I'm not sure, I need more clarification, again, we'll share some times when we can say, come, tell us who your organization is, what you do, where you work, and let's be in conversation. The first thing that many organizations are doing, and that is the first step we encourage you to do, is to take the eligibility quiz. So when you go onto our website and you go to the flexible funding page, when you click what will say like apply, start now, the first thing you get is a quick quiz that asks you a few questions. Where you work, like county wise, your strategic focus areas, your budget. We ask a question if you have financial information. Based on a combination of that, the vast majority of organizations will then open up the application. If you don't, that means you don't hit one of our basic eligibility criteria. And again, if you have questions, if you think you got a failed eligibility quiz and you weren't sure that you should have, just reach out to us. After you get that opening of the application, within 48 hours of business working hours, so basically like 2 days, you will get an email from us telling you if we think, based on the information that you shared and we know, if flexible funding is a good fit or maybe not a good fit. We're not going to tell you don't apply or definitely apply, but if you're in one of our focus areas, if you're geographically in a place that we serve and that's connected, if your budget is within our eligibility criteria, if you say you have financials, we're going to let you know that it's a incredibly competitive process, but we think we should apply. If the information that you provide us lets us know we have some questions, we don't think they hit in a focus area, like we think this may not be worth your time to apply, we're going to send you an email that says we don't think flexible funding is a good fit. That's not an invitation to not apply, though you might say, okay, like we weren't sure and we got that signal, we're going to focus our energies elsewhere. But it's an invitation to reach out to us and let us get to know you even better. Even if you think we know you well, we may be missing some key information to talk with us before you fill out that application. We've seen a couple organizations that are super eager that take the eligibility quiz, turn around that afternoon and fill out the application. And um, and we think it may not be a good fit, and we just don't want you to waste your time, right? Like your work is most valuably spent doing the incredible mission service that you do, and also seeking funding that is most likely the best fit. So wait for that email or reach out for us is the best strategy that we can tell you, and then we can have a conversation. So with that, I'm now going to dive into the financial information part. We try to keep things pretty straightforward when we're asking for financials. We have access to tax records, to other information that is like generated off of publicly available financial information. So we're asking you not the minimum, but really what we need to know in order to be able to make a decision. We ask for two things. The first one is formally called a statement of activities. You might call it a P&L, a revenue and expense document. It's sometimes in nonprofits in your financial statements, you're going to see a functional expenses. Basically, what it is here's the money that came in last year, and here's the money that we spent. And generally speaking, at the bottom of that, if you brought in slightly more money or significantly more money than you spent, you're going to have a surplus. And if you spent more money than you had, you're going to be running a deficit, which is going to beg some questions like, how did you do that? Right? It is very hard to spend money you don't have, although many of us find ways to do that. We are looking that for your last fiscal year. So some of you, that is going to be calendar year 2023. For some of you, that's probably going to look more like June 2023 to the very beginning of July 2024. Some of you might be working on September fiscal years. It doesn't matter, but it should all have happened in the past. These do not need to be audited. We know that many of you, based on your budget size, actually aren't doing audits. That's okay. But it should be accurate enough that you would share it with your board of directors, right? And so if you say this is a hot mess, it doesn't actually reflect what we did, that's not helpful because we're trying to understand what you did. We also hope that by this point, unless you literally have like a September 1 fiscal year, which we can then have a conversation, what's past, what's present, that like generally speaking, even for those organizations that whose fiscal year ends at the end of June, that you've closed your books in some way by the time the submission date comes in September, the middle of September. The second information what we're looking for is a budget. A budget is simply a plan. right? It is, this is how we think we're going to bring in money next year, and this is how we think we're going to spend it. A budget needs to have both revenue and expenses. Most of us only focus on the expenses when we're thinking about a budget, but for our sake, we are asking questions like, this is a plan that makes sense for how they're going to spend money. How are they going to pay for that, right? And so it is very much in line with the previous document of last year's. What did you bring in? What did you spend? That's what happened in reality. The budget is your plan for this year, and it should be within your current fiscal year. We know that that means that some of that is, it's just a plan, right? Things are going to happen, they're going to change, but it allows us to look at your last 2 years and really get a sense of what's going on. If you have questions, you should just reach out to us and say, hey, this is where we are. Some organizations, for example, have a working budget at the beginning of a fiscal year, but it's only until Q1 until they finalize it. A great example of that might be someone that's doing post-secondary education and training who works more in a traditional school year, but has a June, July fiscal year end. And so you might say, hey, we have a sense of our budget, but only when the students show back up in September do we know our actual numbers. That's okay. Let's have a conversation to say, does it make sense to see your plan in June? Does it make sense to see your plan in September? Again, there's like no right and wrong answers here, but we're trying to understand what you do. And part of what you do, a large part of, is actually how you spend your money. So I'm going to pause right here and just see if there are any questions just about what we require. And happy if you want to throw it in the chat or if anybody wants to come off of mute.
So far, there's no questions in the chat right now, Meredith.
Great. All right, the next step is I want to show you a few of what these documents may look like. This is not what they definitely need to look like, but if you're like, I don't know what a statement of activities is, that's okay. Like, we're going to show you because maybe you're like, oh, I've seen that thing from my treasurer, from the bookkeeper. I understand. So this is, generally speaking, what the first half of a statement of activities, a P&L, is going to look like. And I know it's small, but I'm going to just break down what's in here, and then we're happy to share kind of versions of this. A statement of activities is going to show your revenue at the top. Ideally, it's going to show it broken down into more than one line other than revenue. So in this particular case, it's showing the restricted contributions, right? So that might be restricted grants, right? Some organizations, some foundations, this is a project grant that came in. This is money if you have an endowment that's coming from. This is a donation from an individual that has a restriction. You also might be showing unrestricted. This is like the thing that we all love, general operating dollars. You might have government grants. You might have program and tuition fees. You might do a fee for service, but it's going to show all the money that's coming in. And generally speaking, it's going to be grouped in some way that's going to make sense in your head for your work. You don't need to group it like this. We need to make sure that you also understand your finances. That's part of general operating dollars, is giving you a grant and saying, you can manage this. This is part of that process, is saying, we know how to manage our money. This is how we think about it. But again, it's going to show your revenue by various sources. The bottom of this same document is going to show your expenses. So there's going to be salary somewhere on here. There's going to be likely health insurance and payroll taxes. There's also going to be programmatic expenses. You might have rent. You probably have rent or some kind of overhead. It's going to show all of those chunks. And then at the bottom of this, again, there's going to be a difference between these two numbers, and you're going to show that, right? Like, and so whether it's net income, whether it's difference, we'll know at the bottom number, it's the top minus the bottom, right? And so again, however makes sense that you're doing this, ideally for our grant process, you are not creating a new document. You are taking what you already use in your internal management meetings with your board. And it's why we allow for a variety of submissions and why we don't have a template that you have to use. The second document is going to can look very similar, can look the same. And again, it's just going to be a budget document. So this is a really simple budget document. Shows our plan for revenue and shows our plan for expenses. And in this case, it happens to even out to 0, which is really rare, but good for this very simple organization. Budgets don't need to be complicated. We're not looking to say individual salaries, this is how what we do, but if your documents do show individual people, that's okay. All the information that you share with us is confidential. It's not shared beyond our staff and our grants process. So now I want to show a few samples. These are redacted samples that are from organizations that we've actually funded in the past. So if your budget looks something similar to this, you're probably in good shape because that's been enough for us to understand that. So give me 1 second on the share machine here while I stop sharing one thing and pull up another. All right, here we go.
Meredith, I just heard from somebody
Yeah,
who's having trouble seeing your screen before.
because it's too small.
No, they actually couldn't even see the shared part. Let's see if they can see it this time.
Great. Um, okay, can folks are seeing something that looks like a spreadsheet? Fantastic. This is an actual thing that we got in. We've done some redacting. So you'll see that this is side by side, which was actually very helpful for us because we can see this is the actuals. This is the first document that we asked for, the statement of activities or your P&L. So this is what actually happened in this organization this year. They got some state grants, they got some foundation grants, they got some support from some regional banks. This is really awesome. So this is the total foundation amount. They then got some restricted grants that they categorized another way. Why are those down here? Why are those up here? I don't care. That's however they need to show their documents to make it work. They're then showing their fundraising. They bring in a little bit fee for service, and this is their total income. Great. So I have a sense this is the organization size. They're then showing the next year budget. The reason why this particular viewpoint can be helpful both for you and for us is we can see, oh, look, they're predicting getting additional money coming in from this other foundation. These grants are going to be holding stable. This grant is disappearing. Oh, that's important for us as a funder to know. Oh, that's interesting. They might need our additional support, but there's some new grants coming in. Overall, we can see that they're anticipating being in a better position with foundation grants in this upcoming year, the current year, than, excuse me, than they were last year. So we're going to do the same thing. We're not scrutinizing line by line, but it does give us a sense, oh, look, this organization is growing, right? It's really helpful information for us. Likewise, on the expenses, we can see, okay, this makes sense. Salaries are going up. They generally go up every year. Benefits are going up. This gives us a sense this is a 3.5-person organization. We get a sense of their overall salary number. They've had some consultants and they have some programs, right? And we can see also that their programming is growing. That's consistent with bringing in more money. We can see here that they're doing an audit for the first time, an annual financial review. $10,000 is about the amount that costs. That makes total sense. We're seeing, again, kind of what's going on with membership fees. They're going to be doing a little bit more travel this year. That makes sense as they were coming out of COVID. And we're going to get a sense of their total expenses, which are also increasing. And overall, they're running a very small but a clear surplus. This is all we need. And we are not looking to say, I don't see D&O, even though I can tell you directors and officers, insurance is something that is pretty standard at any 501c3. We're not looking to say, are they paying this? Are they doing that? This person's paid too much. We're just trying to get a high level sense of the numbers and really like, how is our funding potentially going to fit into the mix? So this is one example. The next example I'm going to pull up is going to look really different. And you're going to see that what I've said before is hopefully true, which is we don't care what it looks like as long as we can understand it. So that is the real key here. So this next one, can folks see this screen? Can I get a nod or a thumbs up? Thank you. Kim, you're like my chief nodder over there. For some reason, you're at the top. So thanks for helping me out. Um, for those of you that recognize, this is something that comes out of QuickBooks, right? And so for those of you, many of you are probably using QuickBooks. There's other accounting software, but QuickBooks is most prevalent. They just went in and they ran their income and expense statement. This is great. It's not side by side. Revenues at the top. We get it. The next pages are expenditures. These are the codes that they have in their document. And so you're going to see some very similar ones to the previous spreadsheet. There's D&O liability. We understand that banks and PayPal have fees. We're going to see travel, meetings, cost, parking. We're going to see payroll, right? So these are salaries of folks. This is great. We can do the side-by-side comparison. We can read left to right and top to down. We're very talented. But you'll see here that like this is giving us their net revenue, their net expenses, and we can do the comparison, right? So this is also perfectly acceptable. If you're using QuickBooks, you should be able to, or whoever is your QuickBooks user, your accountant, your bookkeeper, your fractional bookkeeper, you should be able to go in and pull a P&L. And in fact, this organization, I took it out, but they ran an income and expense statement, and then they also ran the P&L function, and they were identical in QuickBooks, right? So we have sometimes different names and different organization structures. Those can mean different things, but revenue on one side, expenses on the other. Here is sample three, which you can see, this is a Xerox copy of something. I can just tell in the quality. And this is okay too. Like ideally, we would have loved a better breakdown of grants and contract revenue. I'll also tell you, we know this agency, we know the contracts. That is something that under where you can submit your budget and your financial information, you have a section that says budget narrative. And so if you really feel like we need to be able to explain what's going on in the contracts, but many of you have those state and city contracts, and so we kind of understand what it is. And again, here salaries are lumped. Like I said before, for some of you in your documents, you're already presenting your salaries broken down. For some of you, you're aggregating it. That's okay, right? We understand what's going on here, where we fit into this mix. Um, we understand when we're seeing school fees, employment retention credits, for many of you, that was part of last fiscal year. This is helpful. And we're seeing, again, their surplus and deficit. And what's nice about this one, which again, we don't require this, but it is showing in addition to, this is their last year's actuals, they're comparing it against the budget. So it does help us to say that like, this is how much they're able to do against their contributions, right? These are their grants, but this was their budget. And so again, we just required last year's actuals in this year's budget. If you happen to have last year's budget, that's helpful for us to say, did you meet your actuals? But we don't require it. Here's sample four. And again, like pretty similar. They put actuals and approved, so approved is going to be your budget. These are going to be your actuals. Again, you'll see kind of a broken down. This is an organization that clearly works with schools. And then we get the expenses on this next page. And we get a sense of where their surplus is. We're not looking for you to have a giant surplus, especially in the nonprofits. Unless you're trying to build up cash reserve, you're trying to shift money into an endowment. Generally speaking, you're wanting to spend your money on your services. Some of you will run a deficit intentionally. It's really helpful to tell us that you're doing that and why. Last year, we ran a huge surplus. This year, we can run a deficit. We're running a deficit this year, but there might be something funky going on. Sometimes an organization, if you're running a capital campaign and you're seeing some expenses coming in, but the revenue is going into a different account, we understand. Give us that context, please, right? We cannot be mind readers. So those are some samples of what we've previously, those are all funded organizations, and you'll see they look really different. They have different breakdowns, but all of them are essentially giving us revenue and expenses, both actuals and the current budget. I want to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions on that.
Meredith, we had one general question
Yeah.
that I did indicate that they should reach out to Grants at Community Foundation. But if you're fiscally sponsored or if you're part of a larger organization, the question was, what kind of budgeting information do you want?
Yeah.
For
So
this
if you're
particular
fiscally,
situation, I said reach out to Grants, but
yeah, and I'm also going to separate those out because those are two really good case studies. If you're fiscally sponsored, we're going to ask you as part of your application for a few documents. We look to get your most current fiscally sponsored agreement with your sponsor, and we're looking for their financials. Generally speaking, an organization that is doing fiscal sponsorship is a bit larger than the organization that they're sponsoring. So it's not unlikely that they have, or I guess, let me not use that many negatives. It's likely that they have audited financials. That's our preference. For some reason, if your fiscal sponsor is not doing an audit, we can take information that they've presented to a board. For those of you that are fiscally sponsored, we'll be doing another workshop on the 23rd, which will go through all the details of what you need to provide if you're fiscally sponsored. But generally speaking, the notion of that is I'm going to write a check, as I always tell, I see my colleagues here, I'm going to write a check made out to Margaret, and I'm going to hope it goes to Nicole. that's a bonkers prospect when you think about it from a foundation. And so we really want to make sure that Margaret, so in this case, who I'm writing the check out to, is doing all of her financial due diligence in order to make sure that that money goes to Nicole. So that's why we're going to prefer audited financials there. When it gets down to the budget submission within the in the application for a fiscally sponsored organization, we're only looking for your program budget, right? We've already seen the fiscal sponsor. If you're a program within a larger organization, so let's say if you're a larger organization that runs a preschool, and so therefore you qualify in the Strong Start for Children, the best thing to do would actually be able to attach to the organizational budget a program budget, right? And so we would see the whole YMCA. Here's our actuals from last year. Here's our budget. And then ideally, we would see the same thing for your preschool broken out so that we can like think about you as an applicant in the same way we're thinking about other preschools. And so that would be true for any of the other organizations where if there's, we generally don't do program grants. So I'm hesitant to pull in other examples because I'm thinking you should reach out to us and make sure this is general operating. So we're not going to designate it to a program. So if you say, well, I have a program that's eligible, reach out to us. But generally speaking, if there's an additional budget that we need to see that's going to give context and you have it, just rip it into the PDF. For some of you who say, Meredith, I have 6 different documents, let's say 3, and I can't figure out how to get them all into a PDF, that's where you email grants and we can sometimes attach them for you. Not everybody has access to a PDF, like to a full license of Adobe to make multiple PDFs or multiple documents into one document. Just let us know. We can attach them on our side.
And that was the only question.
Great. So I'm now going to show you a template, which we will email to all of you. And here is the huge caveat in this template. We don't want to see you using this template if you have something else you already use, right? I am imagining that you, in some way, shape, or form, are presenting this information to your board and your management or to yourself, right? But sometimes you say, Meredith, it's confusing to me. This template would be helpful. Or if I'm going to pull it all together, I need to create something for this grant process anyways. So I'm going to show you a very simple template. We will email it. We'll have it available, but you'll see that it's going to look really consistent to hopefully, what I've been talking about. So let me do that, share right now. Share. Kim, can you see it? Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is what it is. And like this is a totally unlocked spreadsheet. So the formulas in here do work, but we want you to be able to delete and to add additional lines. So under income, the way that this is divided right now is contributed and earned. Contributed is what we would call anything in the fundraising department. So you're going to see this is individual donations, foundation grants, government grants, corporate sponsorships, membership dues, fundraising, and anything else that someone gives to you with the expectation that they're getting nothing in return other than you fulfilling your mission.
Meredith,
Okay. Yeah.
Can you make that a little bit larger by any chance?
I
People are having a hard time with seeing it.
Yeah, let's see. How about that? Is that better? Great. So what you'll see here is I've put in fiscal years. You should adjust them for your actual fiscal year. And fiscal years basically line up. So this is last year's. And so you'll see it ends on June 30th, 2024. And the next one starts right away the next day. So we want to see 2 years back to back. Otherwise, like it's really hard to do comparisons. And as I said, generally speaking, anything earlier than last fiscal year, if you're large enough that you're filing 990s, which the vast majority of you are, we can see those. We know they're not the same as these documents, but they do give us a general sense of where you are on your financials. So again, here, this particular template breaks it up. If you say, that's so nice, we've never gotten a federal grant, we'd love to, cool. You just like delete this entire row. So you can do this in Excel, in Google Sheets, whatever you're using, and it just goes away. And if you say like, we have this other cool partnership where it's like, I don't know, foundation partnership. Great. Just, you can add rows in here. Whatever makes sense for you, whatever doesn't make sense for you, take out. Similarly, on earned, we've added, and you'll see that some of these have a bit more, we've been inclusive of the arts, I guess I would say. That is a key focus area. But again, this is ticket sales, this is fees, commissions, royalties, educational class tuitions, workshops. You might say these are 3 different lines on our budget. Great, so break it out. Contracted services, rental income, concessions, merchandise, anything else that you're earning. Other things in here, again, interest income, investment income. So if you're pulling money in from an endowment, if you're making a small percentage on a bank account that actually does translate into something, that's great. And you'll see like what you're going to want to do is make sure that if you're adding rows, that you're adding sums in here, right? Some people will choose under, if they've got a subsection here that is going on for a while, right? They list their grants individually, which you don't have to, but you might want to. You might want to add a subtotal to help us out. So in that case, you would just insert a row here, and you might write something like total grants. The Excel formula for adding things is equal sum, and then you can choose your cells. And then you might say, oh, I'm going to make that a little bit larger, right? Doesn't need to be that large, but however the formatting works for you. Then you're going to have total income, right? Total revenue, that top number. Then you're going to have your bottom, so expenses. So here we've listed salaries. That includes things both like payroll, taxes, and health and retirement, which we hope you're able to provide some of those benefits. You might want to break out who's salaried, who's non-salaried by different departments. Programming supplies, or like if you're an organization, if you're in the food security space, you might actually have like food as a purchasing item. Most of our organizations, the vast majority of their expenses are going to be in personnel. We are the people that make nonprofits work. But again, some folks are going to have programming, facilities, your marketing, advertising, and then all the like things that make an organization work, accounting, insurance, D&O, all of that stuff. Again, you'll break it out in a way that makes sense. Some of you don't mail things, that's awesome, or print things. Some of you print a lot of things. And then again, there might be other expenses if you're a place that's doing depreciation. That's, if you have big equipment that is losing value, if you're regularly doing that, if that's a practice that you're like, Meredith, I don't know what you just said, you're probably not doing it and it's okay. Just delete that line. And then you're going to see your total expenses and net income, which again is this top number here minus this bottom number here. And that's going to lead you to say terms like, are we in the red, which would mean you're running a deficit versus in a black? What does that look like? Again, like we know that many organizations are running small deficits because a budget is a plan. We hope that you have some cash in the bank so that if you have some unexpected expenses, that can even out. If your organization is planning on running a significant deficit, let us know in the statement in either that section, or I'll just share this again one more time. You'll see over here that there is in this one, we've added a notes column. And so if there's something here you need to know, which is like, we just started doing board campaigns, so this one's going to be small, this one's going to be big. We got a really unusual grant. It's a one-time grant versus this is a multi-year grant. Anything that's going to give us that context is helpful. If there's a bigger note, you can certainly add that in the application in that box as well. That's it. We work really, really hard to try not to make this difficult. We don't want you to do more work. It's really, really important to us. And that's why we don't include a budget template on our website at the beginning, because we don't want people to necessarily create something just for us. So in general, the advice that we give is, isn't possible. Don't create something new for us. Use what you already have. If you are creating something new, just remember the principle is we're trying to understand who you are and what you do. We're trying to figure out how you make your money and how you spend your money. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And again, if you have individual questions, I will say some examples recently have been an organization that's been pulling out of an endowment that is a spend down endowment. And so their revenue looked really funky. Spoke to another organization that their program expenses are over here. They're part of a larger organization doing a $20 million capital campaign. They wanted to make sure that wasn't going to be part of the budget restriction. We had a conversation. They brought in, it was like, here's all of our statements. Can you help us navigate it? happy to do that. Organizations that, again, have one-time expenses or revenues that are skewing things in directions, we do understand that people are coming out of the fiscal years that had PPP and potentially ERC. And so if you're saying our budget worked last year, the last few years, because we've had this COVID funding, there's going to be a gap. That's why this current year budget looks really different than last year's actuals. Just let us know. We know that everybody's coming out of COVID funding. And so that context is really helpful. I would say that it's really rare that someone who submitted a budget that we said, we're so concerned about this that that wouldn't be the reason we would fund. Sometimes we're concerned and we might reach out and say, like, how are you doing? Like, what's going on? Like, are you barely staying afloat? Like, like let's have that conversation. But I would say it's incredibly, incredibly rare that we're going to see just one thing in the budget and we're going to say, oh, it was a great application, but we saw this one thing, we're not going to fund it. We take a much more holistic look. That's what I have. And so now I'm open to questions. I think how we'll structure it, just give me 1 second.
There aren't any more in the chat, but if people
Right.
have any, you can take yourself off mute and go for it.
Yeah. We'll do kind of more general questions now. It's 10:45. If you've gotten everything that you need out of this, it was great seeing you. Hope to see you again soon. If you want to hang around for general questions, that's great. And as we kind of dwindle down, if you have individual questions about your organization that you feel comfortable asking on a Zoom, you'll ask it. And if you say, hey, this is a good opportunity, I need to connect with Meredith or with someone at Community Foundation, I will put my email in the chat. The other best way to reach us is grants@communityfoundation.org. That goes to Margaret, myself, Nicole, Jeff, Jennifer, our whole team. And we can field who should be the right person to answer those questions. Though if you're asking financial questions, there's a good chance you're going to find your way to me.